This November, no matter the outcome, we will elect our 47th chief executive. But first, we're going to take a look back at how the presidents became president. This is your countdown to 47. Turning now to LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Prior to becoming the 36th president, Johnson taught at an elementary school in Texas. LBJ was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1937, campaigning on his support of FDR's New Deal. LBJ left Congress in 1940 to enter the Navy. Upon American entry into World War II, Lieutenant Commander Johnson reported for duty. After receiving naval operations training, Johnson began inspection duty in the Pacific, where he was an observer of bomber missions. His service in the war was cut short when President Roosevelt ordered all members of Congress and the armed forces to return. Following his continued service in the U.S. House of Representatives, Johnson was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1948. In 1954, Johnson became the majority leader and began a cooperative relationship with President Eisenhower. In 1960, Senator Johnson ran for the Democratic nomination for president. He lost to fellow Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts. However, Kennedy tapped Johnson to be his running mate. The pair went on to win that November. Johnson served as vice president until the assassination of President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963. Johnson, aboard Air Force One, was then sworn in as the 36th president of the United States. Afterward, the new chief executive made his first remarks.
I know that the world shares the sorrow that Mrs. Kennedy and her family bear. I will do my best. That is all I can do. I ask for your help and God's.
President Johnson then got to work. He prioritized legislation that President Kennedy had been pushing for at the time of his death. One prominent example was the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed public discrimination and segregation. That year, LBJ ran for the high office in his own right. He ran against Republican Barry Goldwater of Arizona and won in a landslide. As president, Johnson began to push for what he called the Great Society. With the backing of Congress, Johnson's Great Society resulted in the passing of prominent programs, including Medicare, in 1965. Two crises came to define President Johnson's second term in office, one domestic and one overseas. The domestic crisis was that of extreme civil unrest in urban areas across the U.S., which eventually led to the assassination of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. The foreign crisis was that of U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, where American forces were trying to fend off the aggression of communist North Vietnam. President Johnson repeatedly attempted negotiations to end the war, but those were unsuccessful. In March of 1968, President Johnson surprised the nation.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
This and the assassination of prominent Democratic candidate Robert F. Kennedy led to chaos at the Democratic Convention and the eventual election of Republican Richard Nixon that November. Lyndon B. Johnson served as President of the United States from 1963 to 1969. I'm Eric George for Valley News Live, and this has been your countdown to 47.